welcome to Vantage this week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by. The biggest story this week was from Lebanon. It faced two major attacks. On Tuesday, pagers exploded all over the country. On Wednesday, it was walkie-talkies. It was a direct attack on the Hezbollah, and Israel is the prime suspect. So how did Israel pull off these attacks? And how will the Hezbollah respond? We'll bring you all the details. This week, we come to you from Sri Lanka. The country is holding its presidential election for the first time since the 2022 economic crisis. Who are the top contenders? What are their policies? And what can Sri Lanka expect in the years to come? We'll bring you the story from ground zero. Meanwhile, in India, Ford is making a comeback. It is making another flip-flop. And a woman at Ernst & Young, India, has died, allegedly due to overwork. All this and more lined up for you. Let's get started.
هذا الجهاز هو كان مسؤول عن البطارية.
The chaos in Lebanon continues. Anything electronic seems unsafe there at the moment. After the pager bombings on Tuesday, we saw a second round of explosions on Wednesday. More devices blew up. After pagers, Israel detonated walkie-talkies, solar energy equipment, and even fingerprint scanners. These are the devices that exploded in Lebanon. Israel says a new phase of the war is underway.
I believe that we are at the start of a new phase in the war, and we must adapt.
The casualty count is mounting in the meantime. More than 30 people have died in the past 2 days in Lebanon, and over 3,000 have been injured. More importantly, it is not clear if Israel's operation is over. Do they have more traps left? Will there be more explosions in the days ahead? People in Lebanon are living in fear. They do not trust anything with a battery.
I didn't expect what happened today. Things are repeating all over again. We had some devices here that we believed were 100% safe, but out of caution, we removed them from the store because we got worried. Our enemy is a traitor. May God give us peace, that's all we can say.
The enemy they're referring to is Israel, which of course is not taking responsibility for the attacks, but it is obvious now. Israel has infiltrated the Hezbollah setup. Its entire communication network has been compromised. The question is, why did Israel launch this attack now? Why now? Some reports say that the Hezbollah had become suspicious. Two of their operatives had some issues with their pagers. They weren't exactly sure what it was, but they felt that something was wrong, and Israel got a whiff of this. They had planted the explosives for a surprise attack. They were supposed to be used in case of a full-blown war between Israel and Hezbollah, but in recent days, the Israeli leadership was concerned about their bomb devices being discovered. So they basically had a choice: detonate the bombs now or wait and see if they're exposed. So it was a use it or lose it moment. That is how they described it. Finally, Israel decided to use it. They triggered the bombs, and now they're preparing for Hezbollah to retaliate. The Israeli military is dropping hints. That's the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force. It says that it has more surprises in its arsenal.
We still have many capabilities that we have not yet activated. We saw some of these things here, and it seems to me that the readiness is good, and we are preparing these plans going forward. The rule is that every time we work on a certain stage, the next two stages are already ready to advance. At each stage, the price for Hezbollah must be higher.
All eyes are now on the Hezbollah. They have suffered a big security breach. Many members of their military unit are hurt. At least 13 Hezbollah fighters are dead. These attacks have also embarrassed them and challenged their grip on power. Yesterday, the walkie-talkies exploded during the funerals of the victims from Tuesday's attacks. Hezbollah has issued fresh threats now.
What happened on Tuesday and Wednesday? On Tuesday, I only want to give a summary as you all know what happened. Thousands of pagers were targeted by the Israeli enemy, and they were all detonated at the same time. The enemy violated, through this attack, all the regulations, laws, and red lines.
So how would they retaliate? What military options do they have? The fact is, their choices and options are limited. They could launch more rockets towards Israel. That's the easy option. Hezbollah has an arsenal of 150,000 rockets. Yesterday, it did launch some of them, targeting Israel's military positions at the northern border. But they couldn't inflict any damage. Israel has bolstered its defenses in the north. It is deploying more soldiers and more military resources. So more rocket attacks may not be as effective as the Hezbollah would like them to be. The next best option would involve roping in Iran. You see, Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy group. It gets funding and military support from Tehran. So the Hezbollah leadership could ask Iran to mobilize other proxy groups in the region to help them. Together, they could launch a wider assault on Israel. And Iran has good reasons to facilitate such an operation. Its envoy to Lebanon was targeted too in the recent attacks. The Iranian envoy to Lebanon was targeted. He was hurt by one of the compromised pagers. Now, Tehran has issued a statement accusing Israel of committing what they call mass murder. Hezbollah has set no deadline for a response, but cross-border tensions remain high. Both Israel and Hezbollah are exchanging fire. We just told you about the rocket attacks from Hezbollah's side. In response, Israel is pounding southern Lebanon with aerial and artillery strikes. So the situation remains quite tense. From the west to regional powers like Jordan and Egypt and even the United Nations, they're all urging restraint. The UN believes that these attacks are a preemptive strike.
This event confirms that there is a serious risk of a dramatic escalation in Lebanon, and everything must be done to avoid that escalation.
These warnings are all falling on deaf ears. As things stand, neither Israel nor Hezbollah appear ready to de-escalate. So pagers were turned into bombs. But how did this happen? Like I said, no one knows for sure, but reports suggest tampering. You see, recently Hezbollah ordered around 3,000 pagers. Labels point to a Taiwanese company. That firm has now denied any involvement in the attack. These devices were fitted with explosives, which could be triggered remotely. So when the time was right, the trigger was activated and 3,000 of these devices exploded. But is this mechanism limited to just pagers? Can it happen to any device, say laptops or even your mobile phone? Can it be triggered to explode while it is in your pocket or in your hand? Our next report tells you.
It was around 3:45 p.m. local time. Pagers in Lebanon received a message. It seemed like business as usual, like a message from the Hezbollah leadership. Instead, this was a trigger. The message activated explosives. Soon, there was smoke coming out of people's pockets before explosions were reported across Lebanon. The blasts continued for an hour. At least 12 people were killed. Thousands are injured. But the question is, how did it happen? Well, the initial guess was a hack, something that made the batteries overheat. Soon, experts ruled it out. So then came another guess, tampering. And that's what officials are going by. Some tampered with these devices. All fingers pointed at Israel. But how did they pull it off? Well, it had to be done in the supply chain, before the pagers even reached Lebanon. Now, Hezbollah ordered these pagers months ago, so it was clearly a long drawn-out plan. The labels pointed at one model, the rugged pager AR-924. They were made by a Taiwanese company, Gold Apollo. But the firm has since denied any involvement. It's redirected the blame to another firm, the Budapest-based BAC Consulting.
Over the past 3 years, Gold Apollo established a long-term private label authorization with this agency called BAC, allowing them to use our trademark for regional sales. Our company provided label authorization to them. This is not a product of Apollo. It is a product I authorized them to use our brand trademark.
But no matter who made it, officials believed that the modus operandi would be the same. The pagers were taken apart, and explosive material was implanted right next to the battery. It was as little as 1 to 2 ounces, but just enough to get the job done. A switch was also added, so that it could be triggered remotely. Now, it's surprising Hezbollah did not consider this. Electronic devices are usually not made in Lebanon. They are imported from outside. And that means there's always a chance of sabotage. Plus, it's not new for Israel. In 1996, its security agency, the Shin Bet, killed Yahya Ayash. He was a Hamas bomb maker. Israel hid explosives in his phone. When he took a call, it exploded. Since then, Hezbollah has mostly used pagers to avoid detection. Now, pagers are the ancestors of smartphones, but still reliable technology. So the group depended on thousands of pagers. They thought they could prevent surveillance, but they did not consider this possibility. Which brings us to technology. Israel caused a cell phone to explode in the 1990s. 2 decades later, it was a pager. So technically, anything can be hacked.
So, it's somewhat surprising that Hezbollah would rely on pagers, knowing that Israel has a history going back decades of being able to detonate electronic devices. Ironically, there were reports in the media not that long ago that Hezbollah essentially broadcast to the world that they were downgrading from cell phones to pagers in order to prevent Israeli intelligence from tracking people using the GPS capabilities. Why they would broadcast something like that to the world.
Either way, it was an intelligence infiltration like no other. Israel may not admit to it, but it was an operational achievement. The investigations have started. This case will be studied for years. And a breach of this magnitude will make groups question their security apparatus for years to come.
India is, and I'm quoting, a very big abuser. That's what Donald Trump has said. He's the Republican presidential nominee. He's in the race to be the next president of the United States of America, one of India's key trade and strategic partners. Yesterday, Trump was speaking at his first campaign event since a second assassination attempt on him. And he described India as a very big abuser of the US-India trade relationship. But at the same time, he called Prime Minister Modi, and I'm quoting again, a fantastic man whom he's set to meet next week when Modi travels to the US. Now, this is a confusing sentiment and statement, but it's part of a pattern. Where is this coming from? And what does this mean for US-India trade? Here is a report.
Driver! Walk straight back! Keep walking!
Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt last week. And yesterday, he took to the stage again. The Republican presidential nominee addressed a town hall in Michigan, and he labeled India a very big abuser. But in the same breath, he called Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi a fantastic man.
So when India, which is a very big abuser, he happens to be coming to meet me next week, and Modi, he's fantastic man. India is very tough.
PM Modi will visit the United States on September 21st. This will be his first visit to the country since he won a historic third term in office. PM Modi will attend the Quad Leaders Summit, which will be hosted by US President Joe Biden. The Quad group is formally called the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. It began as a partnership after the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. It includes India, the US, Australia and Japan. Apart from Quad, PM Modi will attend the UN General Assembly in New York and meet with the Indian diaspora. And now, the US presidential candidate has added another item to his list. Trump says PM Modi will meet him. The details are not clear yet, but by the looks of it, a trade discussion is on the cards. Because when Trump called India an abuser, he was referring to the US-India trade relationship. The US is one of India's key trade partners. For years now, Trump has criticized India for imposing heavy tariffs on imports. A tariff is a tax. It is imposed by one country on the goods and services imported from another country. It protects an economy from import competition. And Trump doesn't like it one bit. In fact, Trump says he will bring in reciprocal trade if he comes into power, meaning he will charge the same amount of tariff as other countries, and he has brought it up on several occasions. In August last year, Trump talked about India's high tax rates on American goods. He threatened to introduce reciprocal taxes. Trump has brought it up when he was in power as well. In 2018, when he was serving as president, Trump called PM Modi a beautiful, fantastic man. But even then, he had raised the issue of high import duty. He shared the example of Harley-Davidson motorbikes that are produced in the United States and the high import duties on it imposed by India. In 2019, Trump brought up the same issue, and this was not an empty threat. 3 months later, the US terminated India's designation as a beneficiary developing country. Under this, certain products can enter the United States duty-free. But India was removed on grounds of not providing equitable and reasonable access to its markets. This deeply hurt trade ties between the two countries. Over time, trade relations between India and the United States have improved. Just last year, they signed a slew of technology and defense deals. This signaled a new era of bilateral relations. Cooperation between the two countries has deepened. But now India's back on Trump's radar, and he may very well come back to power. We are no fortune tellers, but this is not a good sign for US-India trade ties.
While in the US, Prime Minister Modi will also address the Indian diaspora. The event has been planned in Long Island for this Sunday, but just ahead of it, there's been a disturbing development. A Hindu temple has been vandalized there. The vandals used spray paint and inscribed hate messages on the temple's driveway. They were directed at the Indian Prime Minister. Of course, India has issued a strong response. It has called this act of vandalism unacceptable. But the incident also raises security concerns ahead of the Prime Minister's visit. In a country where polarizing politics has sharply divided the people and anti-India elements like Khalistanis are given patronage in the name of freedom of expression. Here's a report.
Another temple has been targeted in America. The BAPS Swaminarayan Temple in New York. It was vandalized. Temple authorities found hate messages spray painted on the temple's entrance. They were directed at India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In a few days, the Indian Prime Minister will be in New York. He plans to address the Indian diaspora at a venue barely 28 kilometers away from this temple. Ahead of the visit, Indian diplomats are demanding strong action from US law enforcement agencies. They reached out to the local community and spoke to local authorities. The vandalism has been condemned by a range of US lawmakers, from Brian Fitzpatrick to Neeraj Antani, Tom Suozzi, and Ro Khanna. They were all quick to condemn the attack on the temple in New York. Local groups like the Hindu American Foundation have highlighted the recent attacks in Canada and the US on X, as well as some fresh threats issued by Khalistanis like Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. Pannu has been sanctioned by India. He allegedly released a video recently where he threatened Indian institutions as well as the Hindu American Foundation. Prime Minister Modi will kick off his America visit next week. It's a high-profile visit. On the 21st of September, he will begin his trip in Delaware, where US President Joe Biden is hosting him and other leaders of the Quad for a summit. He'll leave for New York on the same day, where he has multiple engagements planned. Besides the address to the Indian diaspora, the Prime Minister is expected to meet top American business leaders and attend the United Nations Summit of the Future. In recent days, America has been making headlines for its deepening political polarization. This divide has only been magnified by the recent attempt on Donald Trump's life. This was the second such incident in as many months. The attacks on Hindu temples and the apparent free rein to extremists only highlight America's brewing vulnerabilities within.
3 decades. That's how long Ford had operated in India. That is until 2021, when it shut down production in the country. But the US automaker is making a U-turn. Ford wants to reboot its mothballed factory in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu. It will restart manufacturing for export. But export of what? That's not clear at the moment. Ford previously built cars and engines at this factory. So what's behind their flip-flop? What does this mean for India? Why are auto giants flocking to the world's most populous nation? Here's a report.
Ford is making a U-turn. The US auto giant wants to restart manufacturing in India. It has submitted a letter to the government of Tamil Nadu, also known as the country's Detroit. Tamil Nadu is a business-friendly state in southern India, where Ford's mothballed manufacturing plant still stands. And now, the company wants to repurpose this factory. You see, Ford had operated in India for about 3 decades. But 3 years ago, the car maker declared it would stop building cars here. At the time, this was the result of a perfect storm. From slowdown in the Indian automotive market and regulatory tightening in its export market to accumulated losses, Ford was struggling to crack the domestic market. It was unable to boost volumes, so it stopped producing cars in India for domestic sale in 2021. Then halted export production in 2022. Finally, pulling the plug on manufacturing in India, the company exited the huge market. But now things have changed. The Indian government is attracting billions of dollars in investment from international car manufacturers, and car makers are interested. They want to diversify supply chains away from China. Beijing has dominated the sales of electric vehicles for years. Again, this is a perfect storm, but in a good way for India, and Ford wants to throw its hat in the ring. The details are not clear yet, but Kay Hart, the president of International Markets Group at Ford, says, "This step underscores our ongoing commitment to India as we intend to leverage the manufacturing expertise available in Tamil Nadu to serve new global markets." But this move is bound to serve India as well. Ford's return to India will create more employment opportunities. Experts say at least 3,000 jobs can be expected. It's also good for the optics. This yet again solidifies India's position as a manufacturing hub for international automakers. Tamil Nadu alone is home to several car makers, including Hyundai, Nissan Motor and Renault. Jaguar Land Rover plans to open factories in India, and reportedly so does Tesla. But the Indian market is not for everyone. General Motors has given up on India, and the reason is similar to that of Ford. It's not easy for car makers to price their vehicles low enough to appeal to India's mass consumers and go beyond the country's wealthy. Sure, India is the world's third largest car market, but here international automakers face serious competition from domestic companies and foreign joint ventures such as Tata Motors and Maruti Suzuki. And it's not just about cars. In 2020, motorcycle giant Harley-Davidson exited India because it was facing fierce competition from the locally loved Royal Enfield. After all, India is a cost-sensitive market. Not everyone can get it right, but maybe this time Ford just might.
Sri Lanka. We are here in the capital, Colombo. The island nation is gearing up for elections, the first since the mass protests of 2022. A record 38 candidates are on the ballot, but only 3 really matter. That's current President Ranil Wickremesinghe, centrist leader Sajith Premadasa, and Marxist candidate Anura Kumara Dissanayake. So it's a 3-party contest with no clear frontrunner yet. So who will be Sri Lanka's next president, and what will it mean for the country's future? Our next report tells you.
Colombo feels like it's back on track. The airport was buzzing with tourists. The roads were packed with cars. And for a change, no snaking lines at gas stations. No frenzy for fuel or food. Perhaps Sri Lanka has exorcised the ghosts of 2022. The main junctions are draped in colourful flags and posters. It's the unmistakable sign of what's around the corner: elections. Voting is scheduled to take place on Saturday, but today was the last day of campaigning. Many of the final rallies were organised in Colombo. It was the final pitch before the big day. There are 38 candidates in the fray, all of them men. But realistically, only these three have a chance. Ranil Wickremesinghe is the incumbent. He's part of Sri Lanka's old guard, a 6-time Prime Minister who is known as a free market proponent. Wickremesinghe wasn't elected by the people. He was chosen by members of parliament. When former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled, someone had to take over. Someone had to fix the mess. And that job fell upon Wickremesinghe. He's done a decent job so far. Negotiated a repayment deal with Colombo's main lenders, struck a bailout agreement with the IMF, and also brought down inflation from 70% to around 6% earlier this year. But problems remain. Many voters feel that Wickremesinghe's bitter pill was too bitter. The taxes and utility bills are too high.
Government should focus on the people's foods and education and medicine, and they are not focusing them. They are focusing tax-free vehicles and giving lakhs and lakhs of money for the rural development for the MPs.
Wickremesinghe leads the United National Party, but he's not contesting on their ticket. Instead, he's contesting as an independent. Why? We'll try to get an answer when we interview him tomorrow. But for now, candidate number 2, Sajith Premadasa. He leads the SJB party in Sri Lanka, and he's political royalty. His father was the 3rd president of the country. Ideologically, he's somewhere in the middle. Premadasa has talked about diluting the bitter pill. He wants rich people to shoulder more burdens.
There are burdens that have to be imposed, that the super rich and the rich have to disproportionately take a bigger share of the burden, rather than working men and women of Sri Lanka.
Premadasa has been a cabinet member. He's also been the leader of the opposition, but he's never been president. In 2019, he was defeated by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, so this election could be his chance at glory. The 3rd candidate is Anura Kumara Dissanayake, arguably the most controversial one. Disanayake's party is the People's Liberation Front. It started off as a Marxist group, but very soon veered to violent Sinhalese nationalism. The PLF waged 2 insurrections in the 1970s and 1980s. Tens of thousands died in the bloodbath. But Dissanayake says that that's all in the past. He has positioned himself as a champion of the working class, a break from Colombo's ruling elite.
The people of our country have a great expectation for change. There are many people who took part in public protests who carry the aspirations of those protests. They wanted change, and we are the agents of that change. All the other candidates are the agents of the old, failed traditional system.
Abandoning bullets for ballots is good, but Disanayake's past still haunts Sri Lanka's minorities, and his economic plan has many gaps. Dissanayake has promised to renegotiate the bailout deal with the IMF, but he doesn't say why the IMF would agree to it, or what leverage he has. A Rajapaksa is also in the fray. Namal Rajapaksa, the son of former Prime Minister Mahinda. Most experts agree that he will lose, but that's sort of the point here, testing out the political waters, seeing if the people will accept a Rajapaksa comeback. Stranger things have happened in politics. But 2022 is perhaps too fresh in people's memory. The long lines to buy food and fuel, the shortages at hospitals. It was the worst financial crisis in Sri Lanka's independent history. A crisis brought about by fiscal mismanagement. And that's when people said, enough is enough. Thousands poured onto the streets, demanding the president's ouster. From there to now, Sri Lanka has come a long way. The IMF says the country is making good progress, but it's not out of the woods yet. A lot will depend on who wins this election. If Wickremesinghe wins, expect policy continuity. If Premadasa wins, expect minor disruptions. And if Dissanayake wins, all bets are off. The bailout talks may get complicated. Voters here know that the stakes are high. Their decision will be based on multiple factors. The horror of 2022, the stability since then, and the cost of economic recovery.
This election could come down to small margins. We're talking about a three-way race, like I told you, for just 17 million votes or thereabouts. So every bit of support counts. And that is why there is a lot of talk about the Tamils in Sri Lanka. The Tamils are the largest minority in Sri Lanka, and historically they have voted as one bloc. But this election could be different. The Tamil vote could be split in three different directions. What has caused this split? Who will benefit from it? And what are the big issues for Sri Lankan Tamils? Our next report tells you. With every Sri Lankan election comes the same question. Who will the Tamils vote for? Until now, the answer was straightforward. Whoever is not named Rajapaksa. Both Mahinda and Gotabaya terrorized the Tamil community during the civil war. So their goal was pretty clear. Keep the Rajapaksas out at any cost. But this year, it's not so simple. There is a Rajapaksa on the ballot, but it's not the veteran Mahinda or the disgraced Gotabaya. It's the young scion Namal. Someone who is expected to lose the election anyway. So we ask again, who will the Sri Lankan Tamils vote for? I'm afraid there is no one answer. Sri Lanka has a population of 20 million. 11% of these people are Tamil, and they're concentrated mostly in the country's north and east. But big cities also have Tamil-dominated suburbs. Like this one in Colombo, it's called Velavatta. A lot of people also call it Little Jaffna. On our way here, we saw a lot of Tamil-owned shops. Behind me is a Tamil temple. In the last few years, these people have been dealt a double whammy. A, because of the persecution they faced at the hands of the country's political elite, and B, because of the crippling financial crisis. And these two issues will shape the Tamil vote in this election. There's a three-way split in the vote. Some Tamils are backing their own Tamil candidate, a symbolic contender at best.
යලි යලිත් එකතු පහදු කරමින් අනාගතයේ සුබසීන දකින ඇත්තන්ට
Some are backing mainstream Sinhalese candidates like Sajith Premadasa and Ranil Wickremesinghe, and some are boycotting the election altogether. They feel the system has failed them. It's hard to argue with that. The Sri Lankan civil war lasted from 1983 to 2009. Once the fighting ended, the Tamils had been battered. Almost 100,000 missing, houses razed, land captured, and over 40,000 killed. But the war's end did not mean a fresh start for them, because justice was yet to be served. It was only in 2024 that Sri Lanka proposed setting up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. A draft bill was introduced to this end. And what would the commission do? Punish the perpetrators and offer justice to victims. Most rights groups have called this a hogwash, because real justice requires political will, and many leaders in Sri Lanka do not have that, including the frontrunner, Anura Dissanayake.
It is true that things that should have not happened during the war. On the question of accountability, it should not be in a way to take revenge, not in a way to accuse someone, but only to find out the truth.
No punishment, no accusations. Then what's the point of a justice commission? Surely a light scolding isn't enough for war criminals. Such positions have made one thing clear: this Anayake is not making headway among the Tamils. Many of them remember his party's violent Sinhalese nationalism, which is why they are backing the other mainstream candidates, Premadasa and Wickramasinghe. Premadasa has promised full implementation of the 13th Amendment.
We will be implementing the 13th Amendment. We will ensure that there is maximum devolution in one country. We will ensure that provincial council elections will be held as soon as possible to ensure that people's right is exercised without any further delay.
A quick detour here. In 1987, India and Sri Lanka signed a peace accord. It was aimed at resolving the civil war. The accord called for devolving more powers to the provinces. The hope was more autonomy would keep the Tamils happy. The same year the 13th Amendment was passed, it set up provincial councils in different regions. Just one problem though. These councils were not given any powers. No land power, no police authority and no financial powers. So the devolution was only on paper. Premadasa is promising a full implementation of the 13th Amendment, which is why he's got more Tamil support. Wickramasinghe too is promising to implement the 13th Amendment, but with caveats. He says the Parliament will decide on empowering the regional councils. So voters may see it as a trick. You see, Ranil Wickramasinghe has been around for a long time, and in this time he's made promises to the Tamil voters. But afterwards, you don't see a lot of progress. This time too, he says if he's re-elected, he will set up a special commission to find missing Tamil persons from the war, which is a great idea. But he's been president for 2 years, running the country from the secretariat behind me. Why didn't he do it then? That's the question that a lot of Tamil voters are asking. The Tamil voters may be split, but make no mistake, their vote is more important than ever this time. The Sinhala vote is already divided among the front-runners, so the minority vote could be crucial. If Premadasa or Wickramasinghe can consolidate Tamil votes, it may play to their advantage. But if the vote is split, they may play into Disanayake's hand. Imagine the confusion of being a Tamil voter here. You must account for emotions, for justice, for livelihood, and for tactics before casting your vote. All while knowing that little may change no matter who wins. Staying with India, there's a change of guard in the national capital. Arvind Kejriwal has resigned as Delhi Chief Minister. He's also handpicked his successor, a trusted aide, Atishi. Now, this caps months of political drama. We had charges of corruption, the first ever arrest of a sitting chief minister, a dramatic bail application, and now this, a sudden resignation by Arvind Kejriwal. He's proven to be an astute tactician in the past. The question is, will he succeed again, or has he misread the public sentiment? Let's look at the timeline first. Arvind Kejriwal was arrested by the Enforcement Directorate, or ED, in the month of March. He was accused in the alleged liquor scam. You see, the Delhi government had allowed private players to sell liquor. All they needed was a license. Now, the ED says that this license was sold for commissions, that Kejriwal and his team took bribes for licenses. First, the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi was arrested. Then in the month of March, Kejriwal himself was taken in. He got bail from the top court in July, but by then he had been arrested by a different agency, the CBI, or the Central Bureau of Investigation. That bail plea was heard by the Supreme Court last week, and Kejriwal was granted bail. He could technically stay on as Chief Minister, but he could not visit the CM's office. That was the top court's condition. So what did Kejriwal do? He threw a googly. He announced that he would resign as Chief Minister and that he would return only after he got an honesty certificate. From whom? The people of Delhi.
आप अगर मेरे को फिर आपका एक एक वोट मेरी ईमानदारी का सर्टिफिकेट होगा। अगर आप मेरे को वोट देके जिताओगे और अगर आप कहोगे कि केजरीवाल ईमानदार है, तो चुनाव के बाद उसके बाद जाके मैं सीएम की कुर्सी पे बैठूंगा, तब तक मैं सीएम की कुर्सी पे नहीं बैठूंगा।
Both Kejriwal and Atishi met Delhi's Lieutenant Governor today. Atishi staked claim to become Chief Minister. She's expected to be sworn in within 2 or 3 days. But the reactions were muted. She said Kejriwal would always be Delhi's Chief Minister.
जितना सुख आज मेरे मन में है, आज उससे बहुत ज़्यादा दुख भी मेरे मन में है। दुख इसलिए कि दिल्ली के लोकप्रिय मुख्यमंत्री, मेरे बड़े भाई अरविंद केजरीवाल जी आज इस्तीफा दे रहे हैं। मैं आज ये जरूर कहना चाहती हूँ आम आदमी पार्टी के सभी विधायकों की तरफ से, दिल्ली की 2 करोड़ जनता की तरफ से, कि दिल्ली का एक ही मुख्यमंत्री है और उस मुख्यमंत्री का नाम अरविंद केजरीवाल है।
So why Atishi? Well, loyalty is her biggest plus point. Atishi joined the Delhi cabinet in March 2023. That's after Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia was arrested. She held the Education, Finance and Public Works ministries, all key for Kejriwal's party, the Aam Aadmi Party, or AAP as they're called. She also became the loudest critic of the liquor case probe. Whether it was at press conferences or street protests or social media messages, Atishi was at the forefront of the Aam Aadmi Party campaign, which is why Arvind Kejriwal has now picked her. At 43 years of age, she will be the youngest Chief Minister in India, also the second woman Chief Minister in the country. But I doubt the symbolism will sell. After all, she herself says that Kejriwal is the real CM. The opposition BJP is also calling her a puppet. But what happens next? Well, Delhi goes to polls after February 2025. So Arvind Kejriwal has a couple of options. He can let Atishi complete the Aam Aadmi Party government's term until February next year. Meanwhile, he can also use this time to build a campaign. Less focus on governance, more focus on politics. Perhaps even expand his footprint to other states. Haryana, for instance, is going to polls in October. The Aam Aadmi Party is contesting all 90 seats in that state. Kejriwal was born in Haryana, so he may devote more time to the upcoming election there. The Aam Aadmi Party has already won Punjab and Delhi. No reason they cannot make inroads in Haryana. That's the first possibility. Or he can try to call for early elections in Delhi. Aam Aadmi Party leaders say that is the plan, but it's not a guarantee. The Chief Minister can ask the Lieutenant Governor to dissolve the assembly, to basically hold snap elections in Delhi. But the final decision belongs to the Lieutenant Governor. He is not bound by the Chief Minister's advice. So the elections may or may not happen immediately. And all of this is on point for Kejriwal. His comfort zone is the Delhi electorate. Whenever he's had trouble, he's fallen back on the voters here. Just think back to 2013. Delhi delivered a hung verdict. Arvind Kejriwal formed a government with support from the Congress party. But in 2014, he resigned. He said the coalition was hampering his work. So elections were held again in 2015. And guess what? Aam Aadmi Party won 67 out of 70 seats. In 2020, they nearly repeated that win. The party won 62 out of 70 seats in Delhi. So Arvind Kejriwal trusts the voters of Delhi. He believes that they will give him yet another landslide. And if they do, he will get his honesty certificate. It's classic Kejriwal, dramatic and high stakes. He's turning the election into a referendum on his innocence. If he pulls it off, he can claim vindication. He can say, I resigned, but the people want me back. Chances are that could happen. The Delhi BJP does not have a prominent leader at the moment. They frankly don't look ready for a campaign. Meanwhile, the Aam Aadmi Party cadre is all fired up. So Kejriwal's bet may pay off in the end. But it does make you wonder about one thing. Whatever happened to promises of a party with a difference? Now let's turn our attention to Bangladesh, where India's challenges are only intensifying. New Delhi has a new problem to deal with. A new demand is gaining traction there, a demand for a nuclear arms treaty with Pakistan.
In order to change the Indian habitual perception, our only answer, as I feel, is nuclearization. Nuclearization does not mean that we have to be a nuclear power. Nuclearization, I mean that we have to develop a nuclear treaty with our former adversary Pakistan. Pakistan is the most reliable, trustworthy security ally of Bangladesh. This is exactly what the Indians want us not to believe. They will do anything, I can assure you, they will do anything to protect us from the Indians.
A nuclear treaty with Pakistan. This statement is going viral on social media. And who is the man pushing for it? Well, social media users have identified him as Professor Shahiduzzaman. They say he teaches international relations at Dhaka University. We tried to verify his credentials. We could not find any profile with this name on the Dhaka University website or anywhere else. However, we did find an old article on the internet. It mentions Professor Shahiduzzaman by name. This article was on the Jamaat-e-Islami website. That's right, the same organization that was banned in Bangladesh until July. The ban was lifted in August. Muhammad Yunus gave the orders himself for the ban to be lifted. He's the caretaker leader of Bangladesh. Now, under normal circumstances, few would have paid any heed to such radicals. But they're now very much part of the mainstream in Dhaka. Yunus has given these groups a new lease of life. Professor Shahiduzzaman's demand for a nuclear treaty with Pakistan was received with loud cheers. And it is being amplified by the Pakistani press. Look at these reports for yourself. The Express Tribune is a Pakistani newspaper. It carried Professor Shahiduzzaman's statement. It was part of a larger story on Bangladesh-Pakistan relationship. Apparently, a reset is in the works. Pakistan and Bangladesh are working towards restoring ties. This report says that there have been multiple meetings. Pakistani diplomats have met with their Bangladeshi counterparts. The same piece describes how hard it was for Pakistani diplomats to get a meeting with a Bangladeshi government official when Sheikh Hasina was in power. Islamabad faces no such challenge now. This report says that both sides have held a number of meetings. Next month, Muhammad Yunus will be in New York for the UN General Assembly. Yunus could meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on the sidelines. Islamabad has a long wish list for Dhaka. It wants them to ease the visa process for Pakistani nationals. It wants direct flights to resume and better trade and commercial ties. So Pakistan is trying to get a foot in the door. How should India see this and, more importantly, counter this? What should New Delhi's strategy be at this point, counter strategy? Reports say Prime Minister Modi was supposed to meet Yunus in New York as well, but neither New Delhi nor Dhaka has confirmed this meeting yet. However, India is intensifying contacts in Dhaka, and Indian diplomats in Bangladesh have held a range of meetings. They met several advisors of Yunus. These are the interim ministers holding various portfolios in his government, from home affairs to energy to economics and fisheries. India has been engaging with all key ministries. This flurry of engagements is a good sign. It signals India's willingness to work with the new leadership. But Yunus is sending mixed signals. Last week, he sent a new message to New Delhi. He said that he wants good relations with India. At the same time, he underlined the need for fairness and equality in ties, whatever that means. How should India respond to this? How should we see this? There is only one way forward: constant engagement. And that is how India can navigate this uncertainty, because pulling back would mean ceding ground to Islamist forces, and that would be a setback for Indian interests. New Delhi cannot afford to let that happen. Being a chartered accountant is a matter of pride in India. In 2023, 26-year-old Anna Perail became one. She became a CA. She passed her CA exams with distinction. In March this year, she landed her first job with EY. That's Ernst & Young, one of the big four accounting firms in the world. Perail took to LinkedIn and she made an announcement about her dream job. But 4 months later, she was dead. Recently, her grieving mother, Anita Augustine, penned a letter. She wrote to EY and accused the company of overworking her daughter. She brought up, and I'm quoting, she brought up relentless demands, unrealistic expectations, bombarding work messages, and glorification of overwork. She says that her daughter was suffering from anxiety, sleeplessness, and stress. One day things got so bad that she was rushed to hospital where she was treated for exhaustion. Reports say later she died of a heart attack. Her mother adds in the letter that Peril's co-workers skipped her funeral. Now, these words in this case have shaken workers everywhere. There is a wave of reactions. Thousands of people have taken to social media. They're sharing condolences and empathizing, sharing their own horror stories. They're calling for accountability in corporate offices. Meanwhile, EY has issued a statement. They have condoled the death but denied all allegations. The EY India chairman says, and I'm quoting, "We have around 1 lakh employees. There is no doubt each one has to work hard. Anna worked with us for 4 months. She was allotted work like any other employee. We don't believe that work pressure could have claimed her life." This has invited more backlash. Social media users are calling this a typical corporate response. And while the concern is valid, so far these are only allegations against EY. The centre has launched a probe, so it's best to wait for the result because only a full investigation can reveal what really happened and whether Anna Peril actually died of overwork. But it does highlight a problem that we've raised before, how overwork can kill people. In fact, overwork is killing people across the world. Earlier this month, a Chinese man died. He worked for 104 days continuously, 104 days with just 1 day off. He died from organ failure. The court ruled that his employer was 20% liable for the death, whatever that means. In May this year, an American banker died from a blood clot, allegedly due to overwork. And such cases are everywhere. The World Health Organization says that overwork is killing about 750,000 people each year, 750,000 people every year, because long hours come with health repercussions. There is an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and these are the big ones. But there are also subtler signs. When you sit at your desk all day and type away, it invites stiff joints, your carpal tunnel syndromes, backaches, hurting eyes, headaches. And then there's stress. This is a physical problem too, stress. It releases hormones in your body. This elevates blood pressure and cholesterol. Today, work is more connected than ever, so stress is just a call away. You know that stressful sensation that you feel when your boss calls? It is literally killing you. It may not seem like much. To many of you, this may sound like a typical work week, but after a point, the body cannot take it. In fact, working 55 hours or more can be dangerous. The risk of stroke increases by 35%. The risk of heart disease increases by 17%. That is not to say that you should never work long hours. No one becomes successful by working less. But it's important to know the difference between hard work and overwork. It's important to respect your boundaries, to understand your limits and prioritize your health. As for employers, yes, deadlines are important. Pushing workers is necessary in some cases. But how much and for how long? That's what you need to figure out. As a society, we need to strike a balance between work and life, or else we will continue losing lives. Are you a Manchester City fan? If you are, look away right now. The club is facing charges linked to financial violations in Britain. Around 115 charges in total. All of them cover a period of 9 years. Around the time when Abu Dhabi's ruling family bought the club. And what happens if they lose? Well, they could be docked points, maybe get fined, or even relegated from the Premier League. Of course, that last one is an extreme case. City fans will be hoping the club is exonerated after the trial. The last thing they want is a scandal. City have won 6 out of the last 7 Premier Leagues. Frankly, only a court case can stop them. Rival fans are hoping for exactly that. They're dumping memes on the upcoming City verdict.